So I'm joined today by Maria Giese. Welcome, Maria, to Houston Cinema Arts Festival. This is our 10-year anniversary. What does it mean to you to be here sharing this film with audiences here?
I'm just incredibly honored to be here. It's been wonderful so far, and I feel like this film, This Changes Everything, is so brilliantly executed and so convincing in terms of explaining why gender equality in U.S. entertainment media is so important. So it's wonderful to be here, and I'm so happy to represent this story and this message here in Houston.
So we're so honored to have you here in Houston. We're so excited. I know a lot of women here have been talking about your presence at this festival, and we're also excited to view this film. So what do you think about Houston Cinema Arts Festival's dedication to combining aspects of film and the art world for audiences?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is that Houston is, I think, the most diverse city in the United States, if I'm correct. I used to think it was Los Angeles, but I think I learned otherwise. And also, it's an extraordinary city for the arts. I remember coming here and seeing the DeMille collection, the Cy Twombly paintings. I mean, just absolutely incredible offerings here in so many different ways. And so creating a cinema arts festival is really important addition to the cinema is such an important addition to the arts. Of course, the United States creates 80% of our entertainment media that travels around the world and is so profoundly influential. And really kind of forms our cultural narrative and is so important to the very voice of our civilization. And so the combination of entertainment media and the arts is just profoundly important.
So let's talk about you for a minute. You're one of the most inspiring figures at the forefront of this fight for women to gain equality. You became the first person to instigate the biggest industry-wide federal investigation for women directors in Hollywood history. How does a film like This Changes Everything fit into the current landscape?
It's a great question. I've spent the last 7 years dedicated pretty much 24/7 to this activism and helping create this change. The fact that movies like This Changes Everything are getting made, and of course Amy Adrian, who made Half the Picture, and there are about 7 films right now in total that are getting made about this issue, is really essential because, you know, without it, in a certain sense, my work is invisible. It's so important for the media to talk about it, the news media, and to have films about it, because we want to move this message into the collective consciousness, the collective awareness. Understanding why gender equality in our entertainment media is so important to creating more just and equitable future at large is something very important for people to understand. And I don't want to drone on and on. I mean, I don't want to go on, talk too much, but the fact, what I really want people to understand, it's like almost an aha moment when people get that that our storytelling in our nation, and actually our storytelling globally since the dawn of civilization, has been dominated by men since, you know, forever. And if whoever is telling the stories, whoever is creating our cultural narrative is also controlling the power structure, because our power structure is determined by the stories that we tell. So if half the population, if women are not equally included in our storytelling, we are also not equally included in our power structure. And if we are not included at all, if we are absolutely excluded from our cultural narrative, which we are numerically, and particularly women of color, then we are also excluded from our power structure. So if we want to change our society and create a more just and equitable future, it's essential that we start with our storytelling. We start by using our equal employment opportunity laws to make sure that women and minorities are hired in accordance to their demographic equivalency.
Can you tell me a bit about the journey to uncover the systemic sexism in This Changes Everything?
Yes, you mean, can I talk about my experience, what drove me to this?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes. The wonderful thing about This Changes Everything, actually, which I think so far it's the only film that's done that, is that it really explains the problem of the exclusion of women from Hollywood, from our entertainment media, from the dawn of cinema, and why did it happen, and in the pioneer days, women were working all the time. And then when big Wall Street money came into Hollywood, women got pushed out. I mean, it really is, often really just a matter of money. And so the way it happened was that I, since I was a kid, teenager, wanted to be a film director. And after I graduated from college, I went to UCLA Graduate Film School in a 5-year program, got my Master of Fine Arts, got very lucky, and got to direct a $2 million feature right out of the gate, and was signed at a really powerful agency at William Morris. And I just started pursuing a career as a director, which means you have lots of projects in development. And then as the years went by and I was attached to all these different projects, for one reason, working really hard all day, every day on this pursuit, just as actively pursuing my career as I have been pursuing gender equality for women. And I'm a very determined person. But every single one of those projects, for one reason or another, ended up going to a man, or it didn't happen. The last minute, they would say, oh, we need tax incentives in Canada, and some man would direct it. Or I'd go and have absolutely fantastic meetings and knock it out of the park and think, I've got this job. And then a few months later, my agent would say, oh, and they gave it to this guy. And so I was watching my peers and my classmates, just rise up in power and become the auteur directors of our time. And I started seeing that none of my female classmates and peers were getting films either. And we were all, we didn't know who we were before the internet, before social media. Women were just, in our houses and apartments trying to get our careers going, and didn't, I think, we really blamed ourselves for our failures, and for the fact that we weren't succeeding in the industry, rather than blaming the industry for discrimination. So after about 15 years of this, I went into my guild, into the Directors Guild of America, my union, and started asking questions about why this was going on, and what opportunities were there for women, and why were the numbers not seeming to increase for female directors in terms of hires. And then I just started to count, and I realized that 4% of studio features were being directed by women, that women were directing almost no commercials, the most lucrative category of directing. And at that time, that was in 2011, 2012, I think about 13% of episodic TV shows were being directed by women. And it occurred to me that just numerically, this was inferred discrimination, that this was evidence of discrimination. So in 2013, I took it to the EEOC, and they were not very forthcoming. And then a group of us women directors in the Guild produced this biggest summit ever for women directors. And shortly after that, I went to the ACLU. I had already done a tremendous amount of research into legal precedent and Title VII. And so I was able to go with having articulated the reason that this problem, this issue, has national ramifications, global ramifications, and why it's a profound civil rights issue, a problem that needed to be solved. Oh, I was incredibly grateful when the ACLU took this on.
It's interesting that you said that there was no way before, there was no way to share experiences. This is all coming out now because we're so much more connected. And women are coming together and they're like, oh, that's right. You experience the same thing. And that's how we're slowly finding this out.
It's really extraordinary to think about how easy it was for Hollywood, you know, the industry leaders, and to control Hollywood,
Right.
because as a filmmaker, you had to be represented to be able to get in the door. There was no access, and thanks to social media, we've been able to build this incredible network of you know, women and you know, filmmakers. You can have all kinds of access. You can learn about executives before meeting them. I mean, it's a whole new world now. I think we truly are at the crux of at least the possibility of a total democratization of our entertainment media, thanks to the internet and the advent of the iPhone, and
Right.
that anyone can make a film anywhere in the world.
So This Changes Everything sheds a light on this social justice issue affecting millions of women every day. What do you hope audiences walk away with after watching this film?
I want audiences to have a really clear recognition of the fact of how important our storytelling is, and how our entertainment media industry, how Hollywood isn't just a private industry, but it creates content that is influencing people all over the world. Our entertainment media, the entertainment media that we create here in the United States, in Hollywood, is our nation's most culturally influential global export. And so the stories that we tell here really, it makes a difference in the trajectory of our civilization, in fact. And so I want people to realize that it's not just, you know, stories that people are telling. It's impactful in an immense and profound way, and it's so important for all of us to be able to, for the stories to represent who we are as a nation. I want men to realize why. Okay, let me say that again. I want everyone to realize how. I want everyone to realize two things: how important it is that our entertainment media really represents us authentically as a people, and also that we have a law in place, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, that promises equal employment opportunity to all Americans, and that law needs to be enforced. It's you know, a lot of people think that, you know, that it's like socialism, you know, that you know, that what I'm suggesting is some kind of socialism. It's not. It's our law. It's our name. People fought and died for Title VII, for equal employment opportunity law, and it simply is not being enforced.
This project also has the support of several A-list actresses who have experienced the same sexism. What sort of impact does their presence have on a film like this?
Well, it's really so wonderful that these incredibly powerful women have come forward to support this issue and support this film. And they speak so articulately about the issue. I think it became much more easier. I think it became easier for women to speak out after the, you know, Me Too happened. But I think that it's very important for us all to recognize that sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace is truly just one of many symptoms of employment inequality and pay inequality. and that if we can fix gender equal, if we can enforce Title VII in the workplace, we're going to be facing a lot less. We're going to be facing sexual harassment and abuse a lot less. So I want to put that in a nutshell because your question is really important. Having women who are celebrities, their voices really make an enormous difference. So having them speak out in support of this issue and giving their voices to Tom Donahue's film is very, very important, and I'm so grateful that they brought their voices to this issue.
Is there a solution to this problem?
Yes, there is a really simple solution to this problem. All we need to do is enforce Title VII. We women are going into film schools at 50-50, thanks to Title IX. And we are graduating from film schools equally with men. And then we're stepping onto a playing field that is almost vertical. There are many very simple ways just to make sure that Title VII is enforced in Hollywood, and we have to look to our federal government to enforce this law that is so central to who we are as a people. The most important step that we've taken is that this has gone to the ACLU, and the ACLU called upon the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission of the United States Department of Justice, to investigate, and they took it on. And so that investigation has now been going on for about 3 years, and we don't know where it is because the EEOC functions in confidentiality. But I'm trying to encourage a congressional inquiry to find out where the investigation is. We are also seeing incredible change because of the legal action that got initiated since 2014. For example, Procter & Gamble, that spends $7 billion a year on advertising, last September pledged to hire 50% women to direct their commercials by 2023. We also have seen a new report from the Directors Guild that just came out that said that the number of female director hires that was at 13% when I started this in 2012 has skyrocketed up to 25% this year. So we are seeing big changes, but we aren't seeing any changes in feature films. That still has flatlined. So there are many steps that we have to take, but at the heart of it is that our entertainment media industry needs to abide by our Equal Employment Opportunity law.
What change would you like to see take place as a result of this film?
I would like to see half of the stories that come out of our entertainment media industry to be told by women. I'd like to see intersectional parity, and I'd like to see a great deal more diversity of voice in our country's storytelling. I think that it will benefit all of us and make our country a much greater place. And I think it's really important, if we American people want to be a guiding light in this world, that we live in accordance with the basic tenets of our founding fathers, that we live in accordance to our laws, and that we represent the fundamental ideals of equality and justice that we say we care so much about.
It's a basic human right.
It's
a basic human right.
And it's a constitutional right.
Yeah. The director you mentioned earlier, Tom Donahue, has spoken to the toxic masculinity prevalent in the industry. How important is it to include men in this conversation?
Well, it's absolutely essential to include men in this conversation. You know, it's really interesting. A lot of people were troubled, or not a lot of people, some people were troubled by the fact that this film was directed by a man. A film about female directors was directed by a man. And you know, I'm fond of saying that in 1996, I directed a feature film about British soccer. And every single review, from the broadsheets to the tabloids, every review, the first thing they said was citing my gender, and in a derogatory way. And I like to say, you know, do we really want to repeat that you know, what we've been doing, what people have been doing to women, you know, all of with female filmmakers, you know, do we want to do that? Having a male perspective on this is really so important. First of all, men are controlling the industry, and we need their help in terms of changing that. Also, you know, the women who have been executives in high places do not have records, better records than male executives in terms of female hires. In fact, women executives have historically been more risk averse even than male executives. So I think we really can look to men to be our allies. I think once men and women together recognize that this is not a partisan issue. You know, this is you know, an issue of national importance and of global impact. And I think that, you know, we need to make this change together, all of us. We all need to come together to make this change. So I'm really grateful that Tom made this film and that he's given so much. You know, he really, when Tom was directing the film, he really challenged male executives. When you see the film, you can see that he went and, you know, showed them evidence of their history of their lack of history of hiring women, and because of that, the symbiosis of making the film and this history, this time, you know, unfolding, really ended up resulting in change. So it's so interesting to watch the film and see how the impact of making a film and making something public really you know, can help foster even faster change. And you can see the change happening you can see he's documenting the change while he's also helping create the change.
This film is more than women coming forward to tell their stories. It offers a glimpse into the forces that drive gender discrimination in the industry. What does a film like this mean to you personally?
Well, the film is very, very personal to me. Tom followed me for almost 3 years. It was very difficult what I did personally. It took an enormous toll on me, on my personal life. I have 2 children, and what I did impacted their lives a great deal too. Right after the investigation happened, I was so blacklisted in my union and had fought such heavy battles that I actually left LA after 27 years and moved to Connecticut with my children and my husband. So I felt very isolated at that time, and also at that time the EEOC had, you know, taken on the investigation, and they have to function in total confidentiality. So I was no longer able to participate in that part of the process, and that was very hard for me too. So when Tom and Elon came out and began to interview me and actually followed me as I was creating the Women's Media Summit, and while I was traveling to different places and giving talks, it gave me, it it helped me survive. It helped me believe and hope and keep going too. I mean, I think there really is an interesting symbiosis when a film is being made that involves your work and what you're doing, and you're being followed, and then the people around you are seeing this crew there, and so it makes things. It makes some things happen faster than perhaps they would normally have happened. So to know that my work was not going to be invisible, that I wasn't going to be forgotten, and I think very often the people who kind of speak out and sacrifice everything for a collective cause become pariahs. And it's really instead so important that our society celebrates the people who give up, who make sacrifices, for collective change. But historically, that doesn't happen. And so it was very, very meaningful to me personally that they were making this film, and I was involved throughout the process.
You mentioned earlier that female executives do not have that great of a track record, not much better than men anyway. Why do you think that is?
I think that being an executive in a boys' club industry makes anybody who's marginalized, and women specifically in this case, more risk averse than perhaps even men are. I think that when you're not empowered, you kind of want to play by the rules. You might not take as many risks as one otherwise might. And so I think a lot of women executives were doing just that. They were playing by the rules. And I also think that women are, just as much a victim to gender bias and to discrimination as anyone else is. And I think part of this whole process has been such an important part of this process has been for us women to come to terms with our biases, and to come to terms with the fact that we ourselves discriminate against us.
What social impact plans do you have in store now that this film has been released and shown to audiences?
I feel that I am not anywhere near an end to this process. I'm not even anywhere near the middle. I feel like we have so much work to do. What has happened historically is that we make some headway. I mean, the incredible work that people, men and women, did to launch the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And the sacrifices women made to launch the women's lib movement in the 70s. And then, in the 80s and 90s, we went into this kind of state of lethargy. The work had been done, we thought. And so the numbers fell back. And so now here we have to once again move this issue forward. And so really the work that we've been doing, the work that I've been doing, has really been on the shoulders of the previous generation. We're having to rebuild on the foundations of the work that other people have done in the past. And so I feel like we can't lose the momentum. We've got this far. We've got this federal investigation going. We've moved this into the mainstream media. We've moved it into the global media. It's having impact around the world, and we cannot lose our momentum. We need to take it the entire distance. We can't lose our grip. So I think the most important next step is to move this into Congress. We have to inform our representatives of this issue. and so that they can help make the legislative changes that are necessary to be able to be sure that Title VII is enforced and be sure that equal employment opportunity can flourish in our entertainment media industry.
Have you had anybody reach out since This Changes Everything hit the festival circuit? Anyone who might be a little nervous right now as to anything that they might have done in the past?
There's so much to say about that issue. First of all, I think Tom and Elon and Creative Chaos, the production company that made This Changes Everything, are primarily concerned about policy change to have positive socio-political impact. They did that with their previous film, Thank You for Your Service, and they want to do that with this film too, and so we're working toward that goal together. What we want to foster legal actions and legislative change so that they just didn't make the film to tell the story, but they made the film to act as a a spearhead in terms of creating real, enduring change.
What challenges have you faced since taking on this issue? You talked earlier about being blacklisted. Are you still feeling those effects now, even as you're fighting?
Completely. As the numbers have been moving up very, very fast in episodic television, you're seeing very often the women who are getting all those jobs are the very women that my union set to try to stop my activism. The people who benefit from this kind of activism aren't the people who do the fighting, and that's been hard to watch. To watch the women that fought the work that I was doing, that we were doing in my union, and to see them, benefiting. But it's great to see any woman getting the jobs, and we need to see the numbers move up. I guess, in a certain sense, this has been really great for me, because the fact of this film and the fact of other films that have got made and being able to be in the limelight a little bit gives me a better foundation to continue my activism. You need to have that, to have the credibility to continue. And then, of course, I've never given up my dream of being a director. I continue to try to develop feature films, screenplays, and I really do hope to direct again soon.
So a lot of men don't know how to talk about these issues, and Tom has achieved something extraordinary with This Changes Everything by facilitating that conversation. What do you hope comes out of this conversation for men specifically? What do you hope men take away from this?
I think that men need to be at the forefront of this change, and I think that when men see so many men in the film articulating the really important reasons that we need to make this essential change, I think that will help them become convinced of it. The big issue comes of meritocracy, the whole idea that if we hire, women, we're hiring people who are less experienced or something. The fact of the matter is that if you want real meritocracy, you need to have real fair competition, and that doesn't mean that just one half of the population is competing against themselves. It means that all of the people have equal opportunity to compete fairly against each other. I mean, I always think it's extraordinary, these men standing up and winning Academy Awards. And if they would only think for a moment that they're just competing against each other, it's like an unfair game. That women, half the population doesn't even get a chance to have a shot, you know, and I wish that they would think about that sometimes, you know, what that looks like to us, to have those guys, you know, getting all the movies and then getting the nominations and getting the awards and, you know, being the auteurs, and where half the population isn't even included, doesn't even get a shot.
What have you taken away from this entire experience?
I think that the biggest thing that I have taken away from this entire experience is how astounding it is that we girls, we American women, from childhood to adulthood, are never told what the reality is. Nobody ever says our society functions as a two-class system, cleaved by gender. That there is an advantaged sex and a disadvantaged sex. That when I was in film school, even though the numbers were out there, that practically, you know, zero, you know, women would get to become the feature film directors, nobody ever said that to me. So all our professors were men for the most part, and all the films that we watched were directed by men, and yet it never occurred to any of us that that meant probably, you know, there's a reason for that. And in all likelihood, not one of us women who comprised 50% of this class were ever going to have a shot in hell at being able to do that. But instead, we're brought up as girls and told, you can do anything. And we're in film school and, yeah, well, you just have to be good enough. Well, the fact of the matter is that's not the reality. You know, the reality is that there is a profound injustice in this country where gender is concerned and where race and ethnicity are concerned, and that is not in abidance of our laws or our ideals. So I think that we need to start telling our daughters and start telling female students what they're up against. And if we do that, maybe we'll start thinking about how we can change it so we don't have to say that to our girls.
You're an advocate for including activism with creation. What challenges do you anticipate women will face as they continue to fight for equality?
That's a great question. You know, I mean, from before I started film school, I didn't just want to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a socio-political filmmaker. I wanted to make films that would make a difference, that would have some kind of social impact. That always mattered a lot to me. So I think that women really should create whatever content they want, that they should be true to themselves and tell the stories that they want. But I think it's important for us women filmmakers to know that we can't just be storytellers, that we really also have to be warriors. And we have to do this for each other. You know, we really have to think not just about our own individual advancement, but about being in service to collective good for all women. I really do hope that this film and all the other films that are coming out about this issue, and that my work, if it just does one thing, that it will do that. That we all need to think about how we can to stop being so focused on our individual successes and can think more about how we can create collective good and collective change.
Thank you so much, Maria, for taking the time to talk to me today.
You're so welcome. I hope you're going to be able to cut something articulate out of that.
It has been such an honor, truly, to just sit across from you and talk about this and listening to your fight.